Welcome to our stories, Wisdom from Great Minds, where we dive into the philosophies, life lessons, and defining moments of extraordinary leaders in education and healthcare. I'm Sasha Chupa, your host, and today I have the distinct honor of speaking with someone who has redefined what it means to lead with vision and purpose, Dr. Freeman Hrabowski III, former president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, an honors university. Dr. Hrabowski has been a trailblazer in education, celebrated as one of Times Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world, and recognized for his groundbreaking work in advancing underrepresented students in STEM fields. His leadership has inspired countless students, faculty, and global leaders with innovative approaches and unwavering commitment to excellence. Dr. Hrabowski, thank you for joining us. I'm truly excited to learn from your journey and share your insights with our audience.
Thank you, Sasha. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, before we start, I just wanted to let you know that the questions that I sent were more of a guide.
Sure.
But after reading your book here, Holding Fast to Dreams, Empowering Youth from the Civil Rights Crusade to STEM Achievement, I ended up going a completely different route. I felt like I was getting to know the president of my university all over again. So my first question to you is, your book, Holding Fast to Dreams, begins with such a vivid memories of your childhood during the civil rights movements.
Yes.
What stands out to you most when you think back on these days?
Every person is a product of his or her childhood experiences, and that is certainly true for me. And we're talking about 60 years ago that I was 12. And this was in the early 60s, and I'm sitting in the back of church, and this minister says, if the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our young people know the difference between right and wrong. And I was absolutely fascinated. And I said, who is that guy? And of course, his name was Dr. Martin Luther King. And I went home, told my parents, I want to march. First they said no. The next morning they came in and they said, you can go. I did go. It was a powerful experience. It was frightening. There were dogs and fire hoses. I was very fortunate not to get bitten, but I did spend a week, 5 days in jail. A horrific experience, but an empowering experience. And the experience taught me that even children can have the opportunity to have some impact on their own future, can feel empowered to make tomorrow better than today. And that is the point of my childhood experience, believing that I had some voice, some agency, that I wasn't going to allow myself just to be a victim, that with my parents and my teachers and my church, that I was going to work to prepare myself to fight the good fight for myself and for other people. That is my childhood experience.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I also wanted to ask, was this experience the first time? Because again, you have done a lot of leadership. You have expressed even wanting to fight for the justice of other people.
Yeah.
Was this the first experience that you had when you noticed that you were willing to fight for a better world? Because I also want to note here, you noticed that not only from your birth, where you were born in the basement of this Birmingham hospital,
Right.
but with your mom pretty much asking if there was a Christian to save you from an asthma attack at the hospital once,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
were these all instances that kind of accumulated that you felt like you were marching for, or was it actually this moment speaking to Dr. King?
No, it's a great question, Sasha. No, that moment at 12, when I think about it, that was a matter of all those other experiences coming into my head of things I knew about from having hand-me-down books from the white schools when I was in the second grade and going up to the teacher and saying, I'd been stripping back the brown paper bags that were taped on the back of the book, and you finally get it back and it says the name of the white school, and you realize this old book had been used by white kids for years. And I said to the teacher, why do they give us their hand-me-down books? And her first response was, boy, we told you not to tear that paper back of that book. That wasn't what you were supposed to be doing. But she said, she was embarrassed, and she said, yes, you're right, Freeman. The book is second rate, but you are a child of God. You're first rate. Just get the knowledge in the book. That was the best she could tell me. And it was true. You don't have time to be a victim. But I remembered that they thought so little of us, the school system, that they would give us the hand-me-down books after white children had used them for years. And I was born in the basement of a hospital, and yet I was considered a privileged black child because most black children couldn't go to anybody's hospital. Most black women had to be born with a midwife.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my black doctor had privileges in the basement of that hospital, which was with the pipes, right? It's all relative, but we knew that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. And there were just many other examples of being turned away, of having to drink out of a nasty little, or not drinking out of a nasty little fountain. You see the nice fountain for the white children in the stores downtown, and then this little nasty thing that black children were supposed, my mother would not allow us to drink out of them. Or we'd have to go to the restroom and it would say, no restroom for children. No, I mean, for black children, whites only, you know. So all of my life, the first 12 years, we had seen, and there was nobody downtown in a position of authority who looked like us. There was not a black policeman, not a black fireman, not even a black behind a cash register downtown. The only blacks you saw downtown working were maids and janitors in the stores. We saw people in power in our black communities. Saw the black doctor and the black teachers and our churches, and they were empowering. But you go downtown, Maine, America, it was all white power. That's all you saw. That was all. And on TV, it was all white. You know, I mean, at that point, except for one very demeaning show with Andy and Kingfish. If you go back and Google Amos and Andy show, an awful show for black children to watch. That was it. So your point is, when I heard him saying that the world could be better and we could go to better schools, meaning schools with more resources, it was all these things that I could remember. Yeah, I'm considered second class by the country. Yeah, and I don't want to be. No, my parents have told me, no, I'm a child of God. You know, so excellent question. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. And this is somewhat of a follow-up, especially I come from an experience where I faced injustice. I mentioned this from my story is at UMBC here, because I didn't actually understand my identity of being Black in America as an immigrant until I had a change in socioeconomic status. So you have this group of people here that look like us in America, right? We are all one together, but we have faced different experiences because a lot of and learning about the history of the civil rights movements, knowing that we have this movement to thank for us being here, don't always know what it actually meant to have lived and to have fought for the rights that we have to study here, right? So how in your path did you witness or did you acknowledge that there's now these two different groups of people that somewhat are facing the same challenges in America, but also are facing different challenges? Because again, I didn't even understand my identity as a Black woman in America until my parents died, until I had a change in socioeconomic status. Then all of a sudden I could understand the African American plight, which is unfortunately often the case, that sometimes we do not always understand what it actually meant to have lived and to have faced that racism enough to actually fight and do something about it. There's sometimes is a separation there. So how, I guess, was this something you ever had to approach?
It's a powerful question, and I've thought about it, talked about it a lot, especially because in the UMBC experience, almost half of the undergraduates there of all races have at least one parent from another country. Large numbers of our Black students have come from other countries, from the islands, from different African countries, and their experiences have been very different. I mean, when you come from the continent, you are empowered. You've seen people in power looking like you all your life. So it's very different from in our country before, for example, the early part of this century, when we first saw our first Black president of the United States, Barack Obama. I mean, there are things that we thought would never happen. You had seen heads of state in Africa. And so the typical African American of certain ages doesn't understand what you're saying about having come to this country and not understanding how Blacks are seen here. And so one of the points you're making that's so important is that it is important to have these conversations conversations so all of us of the diaspora can appreciate each other's points of view and what we have experienced. And I appreciate your wanting to know what Blacks of different generations have gone through to get us to this point. And it is true that people of my generation saw in very visible ways the discrimination and the racism that we had begun to see changes through the 70s and 80s and 90s. And I must admit, though, that we are now back to the period when people are very comfortable being openly racist, openly discriminatory, and that while there was a period when people who were educated were experiencing a less discriminatory experience, not completely racism free, but it was better. But for poor people, for people without an education, without the funds, it's always been bad, always been bad. But now, whether one has an education or not, you're seeing discrimination in your face, when people want to suggest that race doesn't matter, when we know, my goodness, how much it matters. And so I would say to you, Sasha, that your stories, you're telling the stories of people is point on, just absolutely on point, because it gets to the core of our history as humankind, as this country, as other countries, as individuals. Our stories are our history. And I tell my story not to be bitter, but to say, lest we forget. Because if you forget, then you are doomed to repeat it. And that's what we're doing right now in our society. We are repeating some of the same things that have happened before. And it says to us, we need to understand that history and what we went through when the governor of my state in Alabama would not let people like me come to the University of Alabama, stood in the door and said, no way was he letting people looking like me go there, for example. And the idea that Blacks shouldn't get support, that we all are equal and we all have had the same chances, and so there shouldn't be any special initiatives to support women and people of color and people from different backgrounds, LGBTQ, all these different groups, when we know the obvious discrimination that has held down certain groups for more than a century, for centuries, you see, to give certain people advantages. And I don't speak, as I say, as an angry Black man. I speak as a mathematician. I've got the data. I can show you the analysis of all of this, And I think reasonable people of any race know that this country has a lot to do to reach the ideals that we talk about. I believe in my country, but I know we can be much better than we are. And I know we have been better in years past than we are today. Do you get that? You know what I mean? Yeah.
James Baldwin happens to be one of my heroes. And this, you bring back to a point here about James Baldwin's, where it seems like we're going back to an America where, again, we look around and we have accepted what we are told. So part of wanting to go into this idea of these stories and why I wanted to start this series is because James Baldwin has said he grew up in an America where you look around and you just have to accept what you were told about yourself, right? So you were told that you accept that you will just be poor. If you are Black, you have to accept that you have to go to these schools. You have to accept that you were a second-class citizen and you do not deserve the best in life. The part that I wanted to bring up even with immigration here is because he also noticed that part of his empowerment came when he realized that Africans were no different than other people in the world, people that looked just like him. He saw that they could also be conniving, they could be murderers, they could be terrorists, they could be anything they wanted to be in the world. So why couldn't he as well? It just so happens that because we are forgetting history, as you said, we are doomed to repeat it, which we have forgotten a lot of the stories that got us these rights in the first place, right? We are forgetting that people have marched people, and he talks about that too in A Fire Next Time. All the people that have walked in the back doors, all the people that walked through the back door so we could walk through the front door, all the people that sent in their applications just so we could get accepted at some point. They never got accepted. They never got, like we mentioned, their dreams were deferred so that our dreams could come true, so that we can have this chance. So in that notion, I want to ask you again, what do you say to our generation leaders that feel like there's not a lot of us that want to even approach, I guess, this fight. And it's hard to call it a fight because no one wants to fight. It's tough even fighting against what we're facing just for our own lives. So no
Sure.
one wants to approach what is really happening.
Sure, sure. Great question. Great question. And I would say several things. Number one, our country has accomplished so much in a short period of time in the scheme of human time, in the scheme of humankind and what's gone on in Europe, in Africa, and Asia, and whatever. We've accomplished so much, and it has been done heavily because of immigrants of all backgrounds, of all backgrounds.
Yeah.
Let me just start there. And if we look at the most accomplished blacks in our country, while I'm very proud of those of us who are descendants of slaves from this country, make no mistake that many of the most extraordinary blacks in our country have backgrounds just a generation or two from another country, from the islands, from Africa. And that's true for you go to New York, and everybody you see it all over, you do, and it's to be celebrated. And anybody who is silly enough to try to suggest that immigrants are just criminals, I mean, it's mind-blowing, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But the key is that, so we start with that point, that we must celebrate the achievements of all of our people, Black people and others, immigrants, those who've been here, number one. Number two, I've been giving speeches on Martin Luther King and on this celebration period, and there's a statement from his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, which I recommend to everyone, from 1964. And the statement says essentially that right defeated is still stronger than evil triumphant. Take a minute and think about that. That even when the right side is defeated, it's still stronger than evil that's winning out for the day, because it's not going to last. And we must know that it is not going to last. I am a man of faith, and I know that God is in the plan. I know that. I may be a mathematician, I may be a former president, but I'm a man of faith. And I know after my 70 plus years of living, God is always in the plan. And he may not be there at the moment you want it, but he's going to be there in time. And we're going to go through some painful experiences, but sometimes pain is needed so some people can open their eyes and to understand why and how we got to where we are today. All right. And my point is this: we must fight for justice for our children, for young people, for the vulnerable ones. And how do we fight? By being as knowledgeable as possible. I love the fact that you, a woman of science, can read literature and speak about James Baldwin. It shows the breadth of your education. And I put a plug in there for UMBC. I really do. I love that fact, that liberal arts background. But the key is we must teach our children, our young people, our families to keep learning and studying and analyzing what goes on. There's a saying from Greek mythology that those the gods wish to destroy, they first make angry. It's not going to help us just to be angry. No, we must be able to analyze what's going on and to think through strategies that can help us to counter all of the evil ways and activities that are hurting us. One of those ways that still is important will be the vote, the whole vote. And we're getting ready in a few months to start talking about 26, and we're talking about Congress. And I truly believe that by the time we come around in the next year, people will have seen such a disaster of what's happening in our country, and eggs will not be any less expensive. All right. And all the challenges, people being laid off and talking about mass deportation, and you're seeing more and more people coming out saying this is crazy. All these wonderful people helping our economy. We need these people here. You know, and people are going to say, stop it. Stop it. I honestly believe that. I have faith that people's eyes, more and more people,
will open. The
lids will come up and say, my God, what are we doing? What is this about? All these tariffs are going to have us in all kinds of difficult situations with these countries. And I would believe that I'm speaking not simply as somebody with one party. I think that reasonable people of any party will see our country is not going in the right direction when you see these drastic changes made, and when you see leaders being appointed who have no moral, no ethical standing. My 13-year-old grandson who lives with us can say to me, Papa, this is not a good man. He looks at people. He says, how do we have people who lie and cheat and rape, Papa? How do we let them become our leaders, Papa? I thought we were a good country. And what am I to say? We have to think about what are we teaching our children of all races? And I think just thinking about the future for our children and the values we want them to have. Do we want them to look up to people who cheat and lie and rape? That's just real. It is. And I can say that I'm a septuagenarian. That's somebody over 70. I can say this. I've seen it all, okay? And I'm saying to you, no, it's not going to last. That right defeated is stronger in the long run than evil triumphant. And I want everybody to go back and read that from Martin King. He is still as wise as ever in his words. Yeah.
One question, and it's 2 minutes here before you have to go check on him. So this will be something that you think about and then come back. But something that I've unfortunately witnessed in my journey in America is how our own people, as we even mentioned for our president, some of the people that voted for him are some of the people that have to face exactly what, the evil that they're having to deal with the decisions of what that was made after. How do you approach, or what are your thoughts on how it can be some of our own that benefit from the good that's being done for our own people that get in the way of actually elevating us? Because that was the biggest, I think, lesson for me to still grasp, the complete shock that it can be our very own that actually is in the way of our release, of our success, of our elevation.
But it's such a good question. And we learned this during the Civil Rights Movement, that we must find ways to help people see the whole picture and what will happen to them. And there are two groups. There may be people who voted against their own goodwill, and then there were lots of people who didn't vote at all, and because they said it wouldn't make a difference. See? And we don't want to kick them. We don't want to make them feel bad, because it's not going to help for us to add to the pain. But we need to be saying, what's in our interest now? What's in our interest now? Whether you voted in a way that's not helping you now, or you didn't vote at all, because a lot of people of every race did not, millions and millions of people just said it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who's in control. And now we see it matters.
It matters a lot.
Yep. So those of us who have a strong feeling that it should be going in another direction, are going to need to use patience and kindness and compassion to say to people, we need you. We need you to help us to right this wrong. We need your help. You do matter. You do matter. And we need you to come with us and help us in this process. And that takes grace, a kind of grace that we all need to have to get beyond being angry at people or bothered and across races, and just to say, what's in the best interest of the vulnerable families and children, of all the people. People who are educated will get through some things. But if we want a society that cares about the least of these, and that does believe that we want a democracy where a few rich people don't control everything, then we have to come together, the rest of us, and say, we will not accept this. We will not allow America to become Germany in the 40s. That's it.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah. Where you actually spoke about your parents, about the deferred, where they help you understand the solution to the two types of people, right? That the difference between people whose dreams are fulfilled and those whose dreams are deferred is often determined by education.
Yeah.
But now with these DEIs being canceled left and right, we're looking at a trend again where they're making it a bit harder for African Americans to get proper, and I say proper education because depending on where you go, you may not get the education that is actually deserving of what we call a proper education, right? So what are your thoughts on the fact that we're now going to be exposed again to dreams that either are deferred because we don't have access to education, or people that are able to make their dreams come true just because they have better access to education?
Sure. Let me start with history by saying that my mother grew up as a child maid in rural Alabama, and yet became an English teacher. And her greatest point of pride was that she was fired from her job as a teacher when she fought for the equalization of teacher salaries in 1948, because black teachers were making a fraction of what white teachers were making, and she led the fight. And she always said, you fight for what you believe in. And I tell you that story because she always said, we must tell our children and our families to never give up hope, to never give up hope. We can make sure our young people get the education they need. There are enough people who are committed to making sure that children of color, poor children in general, and then children of color, black children, Latino children, get the education they need. We cannot be discouraged by this moment. It's not gonna last. Mm-hmm. This too shall pass. That's just what we gotta say. And then we've gotta do the other part, and that is look in the mirror. Are we working with our children in our homes to teach them to read? Mm-hmm. We have school systems where 80, 90% of the children are not proficient in reading. Mm-hmm. And as a math teacher, I'm telling you, you can't do anything else if you can't read. We've got to focus on doing what we can do while we fight the good fight on the outside. We've got to focus on those fundamental skills of the reading and the math and making sure we're teaching those values that we consider important today. And so we can't simply talk about what they're not doing. We will fight those fights, and there are people who are going to help fight those fights. But we must continue to keep the hope and the faith, to say we will get our children prepared so they can go to a community college, a four-year college or whatever, and get the education they need. We cannot give up hope.
Yeah, thank you. Even personally, I needed to hear that because it's so easy to forget. And they say again, like the world screams and God whispers. That was another whisper, right? Yeah. Hope comes as this tiny bit of light that we can't let it completely overshadow us. But sometimes, especially I speak for me, but also sentiments I've gotten from some in our generation where we feel disempowered because we haven't been used to a fight, right? It's not that we've had things handed to us, but we haven't marched, we haven't done, we've witnessed America kind of turn into kind of going backwards, and now we're at a point where we're like, oh, so how did they do that in the past?
Go to history. We can do it. I've seen it done before, and we will do it again. I am more determined that we will do it than ever before because I've seen it done. I've seen it done. We will do it again. We will keep the hope alive.
Like mentioned earlier, the right defeated is more powerful than the wrong, even the light and with the victory.
Just for a moment. Just for a moment. That's it, Sasha.
So that was my final question, Dr. Hrabowski. I cannot thank you enough for even taking the time to meeting with me. I always feel like I leave with this wealth of not only information, but you touch people's lives and make it better. So I mean every word about everything that I've been writing. Thank you for taking the time to hear your story.
I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And you just keep that hope and keep that faith. You pray for me and I'll pray for you.
Thank you. And right. I will think more about what you mentioned because that is, I've been asking myself what life wants it's more important what God wants. If it's for a purpose and outside of myself removing ego, I'm doing my best to remove ego and follow the path that is asked of me.
That's exactly right. Keep that thought. Keep that thought. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.